So one interesting thing I'm fascinated by, just because of the timing of everything, is that Michael Van Buren was on campus, but he was not on campus for the junior day. And I think it's a good time for a player that is a part of the Penn State conversation in 2024 to have our latest Penn State prospect spotlight with Michael Van Buren. So the first thing I want to ask you here is why was it a visit on a Thursday? Or I believe it was Thursday, right? And why not on the weekend or one of these other times?
Yes, I has Michael told me specifically why? No, I would assume it's to get that one-on-one time. I would assume Penn State scheduled it that way, or Michael wanted it that way. Because, look, just look at his two previous visits. The one was in the spring, came with a bunch of St. Francis teammates, and the other was for the Ohio State game, right, which also had a bunch of St. Francis teammates. You have to, at some point through this process, Anthony Specca, for example, had it back July. You need that one day, or Penn State would like for you to have that one day where it's just you and the staff. Now, of course, with everything going on right now from a recruiting perspective, most of the staff was still out on the road yesterday. But all you need for a quarterback, you need Yurchich here, you need Danny O'Brien here, you need Franklin here. And I know all three of those guys are here. I'm sure a couple others maybe made it back early as well. So good reviews coming out of this visit. It was kind of everything you would expect him to say, right? Got the one-on-one time that he needed, got to spend quality time with Yurchich and Danny O'Brien going over the offense. Got to have extended conversations with just him and James Franklin, and of course his family as well, or just how Penn State can help him moving forward. What's important with Penn State, of course, the family-oriented vibe that you hear that all the time with guys, and just taking Michael as a football player and developing there, but also as a man and getting your degree and doing all the things that Penn State really emphasizes. So those were some of the main things Michael came stressed to me coming out of that visit. The one thing I'll also say with Mike is just that he's very, I don't want to say guarded, because he does interviews, but he's not someone to do like the long 10-minute, 15-minute chat on the phone and really open up. So he's always kept it pretty close to the chest as far as like really where he's leaning. I mean, one question I texted him was just kind of where's Penn State stack up with an Oregon or with some of these other schools. And he doesn't, I don't want to say take the bait because that's the wrong word. I'm not trying to trick him, but he's always just like, I like the school. We'll see what happens, which is the right thing to say. And I respect that and understand that. So he's not one to really open up too much. He did narrow his schools to 8. I think Oregon is probably feels like one of Penn State's top competitors. Miami's another one a lot of people have talked about. We'll see with maybe an Oregon or Michigan or some other schools. We'll see down the road. But Penn State should be top 3 with Michael Van Buren. I think the big question really moving forward is just kind of where's Van Buren stack up on that quarterback board? And I don't have an answer for that. Everybody's been asking that, especially since Samaj Jones visited 2 weeks ago. Where does Samaj stand? Where does Michael stand? We've made it really clear, I think, for a long time that Luke Kromenhoek would be the guy that if they got him, Penn State would love that, but that would be the only quarterback they'd probably take in this class. I'm starting to get the vibe, because I don't think Kromenhoek's going to come here. I'm starting to get the vibe there's a real chance Penn State takes 2 quarterbacks. So would they take Van Buren and Samaj? Would Samaj and Van Buren be okay with that? Those are things that all got to get worked out down the road. But both of those guys certainly are top 5. I would say probably top 3, 4. Jaden Bradford is someone I need to get a better feel for. Will he make it back? Let's see. But both of them are clearly very interested in Penn State.
For fans that are just being introduced to Michael Van Buren, let's meet him in the On3 rankings. On3 has him as the 202nd player in the nation, 5'11.5", 185 pounds. In the consensus, he's much higher. You can see that they're 67th nationally. And I think this is the interesting dichotomy of a 5'11" quarterback. And, we've both talked to Charles Power and how he ranks quarterbacks. So guys that maybe lack certain prototypical size and strength might be a little bit lower for On3 than in other recruiting services. But what's your read on Van Buren? I know we've talked about him a little bit here on the show, but can you go into some of your thoughts about him as a football player and that fit at Penn State, which I know is kind of what we just discussed of where is he on the board? But, how do you think all of that shakes out when you see all this information here according to, what we got here at On3?
So I've only watched him up close, like one full time, outside of a camp, like watching a full game. There's a lot I like. There's certainly things he can improve on. I would say this, like when I watch Samaj Jones, and Van Buren. I kind of lean towards Samaj as being a little bit of a, I don't want to say smarter player because they both make good decisions, but I like Samaj a little bit more, if I'm being honest, and I think Charles Power does too. Charles has him as a 4-star prospect. He has Michael as a 4-star prospect as well. But
yeah,
look, the big thing is the size. That's the big thing everybody talks about, and it's the same with Samaj. It's an issue with Samaj. What's Jaden Bradford? I'm trying to pull up Jaden Bradford's size.
I believe he's 6 foot even.
Okay, so he's probably 5'11" too.
Right,
So
exactly.
None of them are 6'2", that prototypical size. I mean, I like Van Buren. I would personally lean towards Samaj a little bit. I think the issue with Samaj is he's probably another inch below Van Buren. Honestly, I think Samaj is a little bit closer to 5'10". So I just think Penn State has a lot to figure out there. Both have a lot to offer. Good players, but if this was the year for Penn State to find, I'm not going to say the next Aller. Every couple of years, you want to get a home run there. I just don't see it out there right now. If I'm being honest, they're good, a lot of good players, but there's no 5-star elite prospect that is knocking down Penn State's door right now. I mean, Julian Sand, they liked a lot. Of course, he's committed to Alabama, and then you have Cromenhoek, who isn't quite as ranked as high, but on Penn State's board, they love him. And then outside of that, you had Davey Belfort a while back. He's not going to end up at Penn State, but he's another guy who's under 6 foot. There's a lot of options there. I like one other thing too is KJ Jackson's a guy we haven't talked about a ton. He did come up to Penn State in the summer. Still trying to get a better feel for his season and how Penn State's looked at him. He has more of that size with 6'3", 215. But the size isn't everything. I don't want to say that's everything. You got to make good decisions. You got to be a good game manager. I've seen Samaj a little bit more. I lean towards Samaj from that perspective a bit more. But at the end of the day, it ain't me making that decision. That's Mike Yurchich.
Yeah, the recruiting process, obviously you want to have the highest ceiling possible, right? Like most of this is built off of height, weight, speed, physical ability, but then, what takes you over the top. And I think the soft skills of a quarterback, especially in high school, might be some of the hardest to understand. And that's where a lot of the nuance of maybe a guy that isn't this is what I was trying to say the other day. Maybe a guy that isn't a high 4-star, 5-star guy. I just, from some of the things I've seen from these guys, the soft skills mean a lot to what Penn State wants and what Mike Yurchich wants in a quarterback. But obviously, you're looking for the complete package, and that's kind of the difference between what you see on film and some recruiting services. I think On3 does a great job of taking that into consideration. But when you got a bunch of 4-star quarterbacks, what's the differentiating factor? One of the differentiating factors, you mentioned this a couple times, Van Buren is a St. Francis prospect. So having him be interested in Penn State and coming up to Penn State is not necessarily a surprise, but how do you factor that into this whole conversation as well?
Until they land someone from St. Francis, I mean, I don't know. I mean, but look, St. Joseph Prep's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same issue. With what they've had over the years with Samaj Jones. Obviously, they got a read from there, but I don't think anybody at either of those schools is against Penn State. I think some fans think that there's something against it. I just don't know if those guys have always fit Penn State. I think a lot of guys coming to those schools, like they have more on their mind is more about NFL and playing right away and some of those things more than family-oriented vibe and academics and some of those things that Penn State really preaches. So I don't have a great answer for it. I never have a great answer for it, and I don't want to kind of skirt around the question, but I get it asked all the time on the board, and until Penn State lands guys from St. Francis, it's just tough for me to take that school not seriously, because I take the school seriously. It's a great program, but it's tough for me to be like, Michael Van Buren's coming to Penn State. I feel really good about this because there's been like 3 or 4 guys over the years where I felt like, this is the one. This is going to be the one that ends it. And then they end up somewhere else.